because the lever for the bathtub drain had rusted shut with age. I wedge a finger between ring and washer, pry up the plug, and the great guttural clug and swirl begins. The wild, enthusiastic rush as one small body of water races for the ocean, days away, thrill rides, the pipe's dark turns, plumbed years ago, knocks post and stud and mouse nest made of chewed up childhood quilts. Shutters pass worn electric wiring and plunges down to cellar, to the big mouth, clay-fired, gray water pipes, all the systems of this whole house banging their pots and pans to celebrate escape. That's how I'd like to go, out too, with whoosh and clang, and gravity's insistent pull as I tumble into other streams that pour off culverts, creeks, and mountainsides, all flowing toward the ocean, which might be home, or might be some symbolic stand-in for eternity, or might simply be the deep, unbounded, wide-open sea. Waters Toward a Sea, a poem of our guest Hayden Saunier's book of poems, Wheel. Good evening. My name is Charles Carr, and welcome to Philly Loves Poetry, collaboration between the Moonstone Art Center of Philadelphia and PhillyCAM. Tonight, and the purpose of our program, as always, is to give our viewers and our listeners the experience of the very rich culture of poetry in the city of Philadelphia and the surrounding community. And tonight we have, a beloved poet, was surely one of become in my top list of poets, not only in Philadelphia, but of all time, and that's Hayden Saunier. Hayden is a poet, actor, and teaching artist living in the Philadelphia area. Hayden has published 6 collections of poetry, and her work has been awarded numerous prizes, including a Pushcart Prize and 12 nominations. The Rattle Poetry Prize, Nimrod International Pablo Neruda Prize, among others. Hayden is the founder and director of No River Twice, and hope we will discuss that a little later in our program, a group of poets who offer interactive poetry readings that are never the same twice. Hayden is a poet laureate, Emerita of Bucks County, Pennsylvania. She's also an actor. Her acting resume includes film and television appearances in The Sixth Sense, Philadelphia Diary, House of Cards, Mindhunter, Hack, and Do No Harm, and dozens of roles at regional theaters such as the Guthrie Theater, Walnut Street Theater here in Philadelphia, the Arden Theater, George Street Playhouse, Interact Theater, and the People's Leighton Theater Company. So Hayden, welcome. It's great to have you again.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Philly Loves Poetry, and Philly does really love your poetry. So I wanted to start our conversation off with just the marvelous, very, very simple title of your book, Wheel, and how, number one, how you came about, that specific title, and how, for you, that ties this collection together.
Well, the collection kind of, my last book was a book that was called A Cartography of Home. So it was a lot about place in all its varieties and what we think of as home, whether it's small or large. And so after I finished that book, as sometimes happens, I had been thinking so much about place that, and I now live on a farm, that it was natural that the kind of the wheel of time and of turning and of the seasons that one encounters daily when you live right on a farm was just apparent to me, and it just kept coming up and coming up. And I don't think I started with this as a title. I was trying to remember what my working title for this collection had been, But as I wrote and as I worked on things and as I kind of found that I was looking at circles and wheels all the time, it just became kind of obvious that this was the simplest way to go.
Wow. And of course, you also frame the collection with 4 separate poems that appear in different sections of the book called Wheel.
Right.
And to speak to that, as I was preparing for this, program, I said, well, Charles, I think you've bumped into several famous poets that have done poets on the wheel or a wheel.
Right.
Of course, Yeats's. But you give this dedication in the beginning of the book to Emily Dickinson, and I learned that she has a number of her poems that insert that. Was that any way to? Number one, why did you select her as your?
Well, that particular piece, which is simply the fine, unvarying axis that regulates the wheel, is about the mystery of what's turning the wheel. We don't know. We just know that it turns. And so I think that was just what I wanted to kind of contemplate or bring in. And she's amazing in her work. There's just, we could go on and on about Emily Dickinson, but just that idea that something's turning the wheel, and that's all we can say. I mean, something's turning it, and regardless of, and I think that's where this started from, because the first poem talks about there's a how to it, but not a why, and all of our questions about why don't really seem to matter.
Could you read one of the wheel poems to kind of get us?
Well, I will read this first one, which kind of started the beginning of it. So this is the first poem in the book. There is a how to it, but not a why. We know enough to know that much, not more. The way tree roots upturned are birds flown into sky, as if the point is to become what we are not. We know enough to know that much, not more. In early spring, our footsteps green the path, as if the point is to become ourselves, and then, in time, become an otherness in early spring. Our footsteps green the path we walk together through tall woods, which is an otherness we will become in time, while everything around us turns and turns. We walk together through tall woods in every season as one rolls into the next, while trees and birds around us turn and green the path we will become in time. The point is to become what we are not. Birds slowly sail through earth, tree roots learn sky. We know enough to know that much, not more. There is a how to it, but not a why.
Wow. That's a glorious poem. And later on, you don't have to read it, but you say in the last wheel, because we are time.
Yeah.
It just kept playing in my head.
Right.
And
right.
I think that's such a fabulous line. It sounds like so simple, but it's simple, but it's very complex if you want to reflect on that. Were you very purposeful in that, because we are time?
Well, I think that was that was part of the discovery, and I mean that to me is why I write. That's why people engage in art or all these conversations, is because there's a discovery to be made. So that was the discovery to me, was in that last poem, trying to, I think at the time this was somewhat pandemic and later, trying to figure out all those questions of why and what and the passage of time and what on earth are we doing here. The fact is that it's the concept that it's continuing to turn and turn and turn, and the concept of time is really hours. And not that I understand that. I've tried to read the physics of it. It eludes me every time. because it's pretty complicated, and yet it's very simple. That, but that one I've been writing a little bit about that, and that'll come out in some new stuff. But that was mainly a discovery as I went through and ordered this book, and began to see all the different kinds of concepts that I was thinking about. Repetition being one that we keep, and we are repetitions. We're just repetitions, of our DNA, and what shows up in the field every year is just another variation on the same thing.
Mm-hmm. One thing that, and I don't know if anybody has said it to you. I hope this isn't too wacky, but
No such thing.
This collection, and of course I've read all your books of poems, but in this one in particular, there's a sensation that we're not describing nature as much as nature is somehow speaking a certain language to us.
Oh, absolutely.
And that comes through in myself. I always think, oh, we are the masters of nature, and therefore we are the arbiters of how to describe it. But there's a feeling in this that no, I think you have the relationship wrong. Is it might be the other way around.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, the idea that we think that nature isn't regarding us at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And I mean, I think, and it's not that it's just that we're not that important human beings. We're just not, except we're doing a lot of damage. But aside from that, we're just not, lots of things have come and gone and come and gone. So absolutely, if that's a wacky thought, I'm wacky right there with you, because I do think that sense that we have dominion over anything is really a false idea.
Yeah, and it reminds me, my wife, several years ago, made me and introduced me to read, it was called The Secret Life of Plants. And she was talking, and it was such a fascinating point, but that these are lives that you don't know anything about, but they're reacting to you, and they're reacting to their environment, and you don't know anything about it. You think you do, but you really don't. And it's only these people that came from more sophisticated kind of instruments to be able to test. There's nervous systems there. There's reactions. There's sadness. There's despair. There is life there.
And I think now it's very well known that there, through the funguses, through the root systems, there's all this communication out there going on, and we're just walking dumbly over the top of it, right?
I think that shows up in I don't know which poem it was, but you mentioned stuff like that about root systems and kind of a life that's happening there that we know nothing about. Right.
Yeah. I'm trying to think which one in particular, because a new poem that I wrote specifically talks about that, but I don't think it's in this book. But the Dominion poem, which was kind of my speaking to that, that's here.
Great. I love that poem, too.
So, shall I just read that? Well, Dominion. So close to understanding everything, we lacked only a verb. We had agency. This was clear. Why else would mists rise to decorate the creek, halo the river? Being water, we needed water. So why else the rain, except to bless us, fill our wells, refill our sense of superiority? We had been given dominion. Spectacular landscapes were designed as epic backgrounds for our rages and desires to lift our hearts with our own grandeur. This was known. Only the verb was inscrutable. Only the verb stuck to the shadows, skittered outside the circle of our fires, eluded the grasp of our opposable thumbs. We had no idea what to do, how to prove our dominion, except by ruining the world, because that was our right. So we ruined it.
Wow.
And that's not my most upbeat.
But, this one gets a book of poems, okay, and for me, it's always the question is, how did this collection? How did you make decisions about the collection? In other words, for me, does it come chronologically, saying, I've reached a certain threshold with a certain number of poems, and I've been, in my mind, I've been kind of building around this, or does it come and say, I think I've arrived at a point that this is all I want to do, and I want to put what I've done up to this point into a collection, or you say, this is the idea that I can take this, and I can take that and make the collection. How does it work with you?
Oh, for this one, I think I began to feel like it's kind of like a little gravitational force. I began to feel like I had enough poems that were kind of moving around the same subject, that they were beginning to form a little solar system. And once that began to happen, I could then begin to kind of write toward it. It was like, then I could fill in some poems. So I kind of created a structure that then I have to upset all the time and change around. But that's kind of how it is. They began to just create their own gravity around this idea of the wheel and the turning and the circles and time and the passage of time. And so once I kind of got that as a structure, as a kind of then I could tack some more things up there. So that's basically what happened. And the creation of the wheel poems kind of almost came as a result of putting the collection together. I did not have those before I started this.
Okay.
But as I worked through the book, and it was actually as I worked through the book and I had these poems and was working with the publisher, this is Diane Lockwood at Terrapin Books. She said, I think you might look at this one poem because I think that's a wheel poem. And she was exactly right, but sometimes it takes someone else to, so that actually the second wheel poem that's about Shiva and and mowing the fields didn't start out as a wheel poem, but then I began to see that it was. And so, because at one point I only had 3 wheels, and we knew we needed 4 wheels to get to get the car going down the road.
I love that.
Otherwise, it was a tricycle. And
like that.
so,
Oh wow! In a review that I read, and I think it was a review of Wheel, the reviewer referred to you as "quote unquote" an agrarian poet, right? And I said, well, of course. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Hayden comes from rural Virginia, and of course, I knew you lived on a farm. So I said, well, is that something she embraces, to call herself an agrarian? I haven't heard that, by the way. I haven't heard that, but I mean, and it's very interesting that I would say 4 of my favorite poets, and they're all local. One, unfortunately, passed away. Yourself, A.V. Christie, Natalie Anderson,
yeah.
Kathy Barham, and I'm forgetting. They all have roots like you in rural communities, and and all 4 of you have certain things in common. Is the ability to really deal with detail and to deal with that in a kind of a searing way. Myself, a guy who was raised in the city, I struggle with that a little. But the great part of it forces me to educate myself more about the natural world.
Right. I grew up in a small town. I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia, but we were always out in the country. We were always out in the countryside. We were always up in the mountains. So really, having moved to this farm in the last 10 years of my life is the first time I've actually lived on
Oh,
40
okay.
acres.
Okay.
Although I was always out in the country. But because of that, and uh, we had a little cabin up in the mountains where we wandered and wandered. I think, though, that I wouldn't really say I'm an agrarian poet, but a lot of the metaphors, a lot of the basic kind of directional metaphors that come naturally to me are natural ones, or like, and I think that's just because I had the real pleasure of spending a huge amount of time sitting by creeks or, walking in the
Right.
woods. And so that to me is maybe the attention to nature and having learned that attention by watching natural things. But I would not say I'm an agrarian poet. I spent a lot of time living in cities,
Okay.
which I love too. So, but I will say this is real. This is definitely a book that has a lot of that, a lot of nature, a lot of agrarian tendencies
Yeah.
in it.
And something else I said, and it's not only in this collection, but every collection that I've read of yours is this attention to detail, not too much, just seems to be just the right kind of balance. And I don't know if you can pick out, a poem that I said to you, that poem that you wrote about dressing yourself for the weather. I said, no, this is just another example of something that is very detailed, but it's very interesting to follow. And do we ever go in this length ourselves to really ponder, that exercise of getting ourselves ready for the
Right,
weather?
right.
I don't know if you want to read that.
I'll be
one.
happy to
Yeah.
read that. And that actually is um, but there are a couple of good examples in here
Yeah,
because
sure.
when you stop and think about things, every door opens. But here it is. This is called How I Suit Up for Winter Storms. Boots from my son's 8th grade year, outgrown far faster than the heart-deep humiliations he bore for being gay that I could not protect him from. I've worn them ever since through snow and sleet. A sheepskin hat too hot for any weather but what nor'easters scream down across fields, one fleece edge turned so the bite taken from it by our long-dead terrier mutt is covered by the blue wool muffler my daughter knitted for me one fall when unemployed and anxious. Leggings, snow pants, and here I might as well confess my underwear's not good. It's functional, everyday, won't ride up, which makes it perfect for this task. Shirt, sweater, upscale jacket passed down from a friend, my husband's old coat with torn pocket, bright red gloves my mother bought on sale before she died, and zippered in my sleeves a chapstick and my father's handkerchief. All set. I'm suited up, armored, armed with shovel and salt to break and keep a path for any to come home.
No, I really.
Well, but what
I mean, it's a very ordinary thing, right?
yeah, exactly.
But you really, the way you capture us in that moment is that's the beauty of poetry for me.
Well, and to me, the discovery in that was because, yes, we don't throw anything out. We have, you keep, especially if you're on a farm, you could just, everything gets ruined anyway. So,
Right.
But I began to realize, look, these are his boots, and this is her scarf, and so
Right.
it's as though I'm wrapping myself in my whole family.
Right.
And how can you not love that? So it was every single piece of, it just made me, it was a pleasure to begin to understand what I was armoring myself with.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Speaking of detail and kind of segueing to you, that other dimension of your your artistry is your life as an actor, right? And I don't know how or if how that kind of transitions or bleeds into you as an artist poet. in two ways. Of course, there is, the language and the dialogue, but there also is this, and I think I even discussed it when our last interview was about settings.
Right.
How you set a poem. It's almost like you stage a poem. And I remember one poem. It's not in this collection. It was a poem probably in the cartography, and it was about you were driving along the road and you saw all this stuff. It was like I think a couch was left.
Oh,
a
yeah,
chair,
yeah.
And I said, the way you described the whole thing, I said, what Hayden is doing, she is setting and putting it on a stage for us as we're observers with her of what she's going to do with this stuff is just left on the road, and she's now made it like a little drama.
Well, I think that's true of like looking out of train windows. I love to look into people's backyards and think, who would I be if I lived there? That's kind of an acting exercise. Or there's a sofa on the side of the road. What happened? Why did somebody put? And there was a period of time in which there seemed to be all kinds of furniture on the side of the road as I was So, yeah, I love those details. I love. I think I'm a narrative poet. If you'd have to put me in, I want to tell the story. And I think, I want to tell the story, whether it's just a little piece of the story, or it's a monologue, or it's kind of a big vista, or just an ordinary thing. And I think that all comes from my love of theater, which I just adore. But it's, cumbersome. It requires someone hiring you. You spend a lot of time unemployed. And this was a way in which I found that I could create my own little theater. You're exactly right. So I do like to kind of set the scene. You usually always know where you are. You're always in a specific place in one of my poems and looking at a specific thing. But that's where these little doors open and you go into these other worlds. So I love.
Could you share one that you think that represents that for you?
I'm looking at this. I'm looking at a scene setting one. Let me see. Well, I'll go ahead and read. Well, how about this? I was going to say I'll read the second wheel, but here's the story their way. This is just set, the scene that's set, which is a walk and with a dog. The story their way. The only thing I have to say about this is that the dog's name is Cleo, who happens to be the muse of history. So the story their way. Cleo, muse of history, walks with me morning and evening, her nose to the air, to the ground, through sweet corn and bean fields, through pastures and steep-sided woods packed with walnuts and cedar, as she follows the spiced, earthy, present tense only. Not me. I'm ragged with news of what's happened and what is to come. We crisscross the creek where she drinks as I deal out fat sycamore leaves to the current, watch them ride for the river, but mostly they snag up, spin slowly in eddies, and sink. We move on. Cleo doesn't waste time on the past. She knows what happened, how everyone else tells the story their way. She's a dog with no dog in the fight. Not that she's blameless, just honest. Sometimes, when I call her to walk, she's stretched in the shade on a stone step, licking her chops at the chicken house door.
One poem that was really very moving, and we've had so many different poems. It's funny you talk about you read last night with Steve Burke, and he probably had the most powerful poem following the mass shooting in Connecticut with those children. And I'll never forget, his It wasn't a long poem, a very short poem, but this grammar lesson, spring 2022,
Oh,
really grabbed me by the throat. And but it also, once again, it's this setting thing. It's this, where you locate us in this and how you use language so masterfully in this. Could you read that for us?
I will, and what I will say is that the form of this poem came to me through that sense that we all kind of have every time this happens, every time this, yeah. It's awful to say over and over and over again, but it has been, is that what are we teaching our children? And so that idea of the way we teach, and of taking that idea of conjugating a verb. So I looked up the actual meaning of the word conjugation, and that was pretty much what led it here. And I don't use epigraphs that often, but this one is called Grammar Lesson, Spring 2022, and it has this epigraph. Conjugation is the variation of the form of a verb by which are identified the voice, mood, tense, number, and person. And boy, those words really land. Dead bodies lie in the road. Dead bodies are lying in the road. Dead bodies were lying in the road. Dead bodies lay in the road. Dead bodies have lain in the supermarket. Dead bodies have been lying in the supermarket. Dead bodies had lain in the supermarket. Dead bodies had been lying in the supermarket. Dead bodies will lie in the classroom. Dead bodies will have lain in the classroom. Dead bodies will have been lying in the classroom. Dead bodies will be lying in the classroom. Sentence review. Dead, adjective, bodies, noun, lie, verb, in, preposition, the, definite article, road, supermarket, classroom, noun. Extra credit. Select the dependent clause that contains unnecessary repetition. Hands bound behind backs, shot through the head, targeted for their color, unidentifiable except by DNA, again and again and again and again and again.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, kind of turn it over to you. What poems you would like to read and discuss out of your collection, and then we can, continue. The other thing, before you go there.
Good. Let's keep talking. It's more. I love to read and talk and read and talk and read and talk because gives a little time between.
Also, is the form of your poems. None of your poems are, real long.
Right.
And you vary. You vary forms. There's a number of poems that are couplets, numbers with tercets and quatrains. How do you choose? Well, this is what the form I'm going to use for this poem. Do you start out? There are some folks that just start out and they write, maybe almost like a prose poem.
Right.
Right, and then they say, now I'm going to give it some space and some breath and do it that way. How do you approach that decision of this is the way I'm going to do it?
Well, I always lineate. I write very few prose poems, and I wish I don't feel like I understand them. I just don't quite understand them. So I'm almost always lineating, and sometimes, writing to the line. And I often will start out and write in couplets just because then I can see the first line and then I can see the second line real clearly. Although some of them, some of the poems end up looking more like that. Sometimes the big block, unless the poem's really moving well, is a little overwhelming. So I want to give people a little bit of air and space in the poem. So that's why I think I do use couplets a lot, and I use tercets a lot. But there's something about just giving a little bit of air to the words, and it just seems to suit the shorter line. So I have to say that really depends upon the poem, and there'll be a poem that I will go back and forth in terms of how it's broken, or if it's just broken into kind of thought chunks. So it really depends upon the poem itself. And I write very badly in really pure form. So I always kind of like, even that first poem that I read, which is kind of pantomime, but it's not really the form. I'll use as much as I can that's working for the poem, but then I don't try to fit it all into the puzzle.
I think of all the styles that are in there, the one that I guess appeals to me the most, and I guess is a prejudice, is with your couplets.
Yeah,
And I guess there's two parts of that for me. It's sound, and it gives you a little time to kind of digest it in a way before you move on. And I find not only in yours, but in poets that use that successfully, they got me.
right, right.
They got me only because it gives me that pause that I need, that kind of breath within myself. Because I try as I'm reading somebody's poem, is to stop and read a lot of stuff out loud to myself.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important for more people to do. It's one thing is just to read it silently. It's another when you hear your own voice and you can understand, I understand why that pause is there, or
Right.
I understand where that emphasis comes from. So you're very successful, I think, in your selections of form, very definitely.
Oh, thank you. Well, and I think you want to slow people down a little bit. I mean, they're short, but they can be very intense, but you want to try to slow people down. And I also do. When I'm writing, I'm always reading out loud. I read to myself all the time. I mean, I speak it out loud.
Do you want to pick up a poem that you want to read that
Well, I'm gonna, since it's, I'm gonna read, actually, I read last night, and Natalie Anderson was there, and she told me how much she liked this poem, so I'll read it again, because it is in couplets, and it is kind of a poem in which something rather ordinary becomes not so ordinary, which I think is kind of what we hope for, is to to walk in and enter a place and see all the different possibilities. So this comes from the really quotidian going to the thrift store.
okay.
It's called Spell. It's on 39. But I do enjoy reading this. Unlikely find in a thrift store's back bin linen sheets that, when washed and fitted to my bed, felt so light I slept in them as though I had become a gauzy net of spun flax, woven to so delicate a mesh that the weight of every woe that had befallen me had somehow fallen through me, dropped away from me, magically, and none of it mattered. I tell you, this was fairy tale stuff. I had no ragged edges whip-stitched into worms, no scars, no patches, scorch marks, burns. I was part of everything apart from nothing. Yet, when I woke afraid. Now, what was I to do? walk out into the world without my tragedies, without my griefs packed into the long drawn-out shadow I'd dragged as ballast behind me valiantly for years? Well, no need to worry. Spells don't last. They're beauties in their brevity. But sometimes I can summon this one back when sheets are freshly washed and smoothed across the bed. I close my eyes, lie lightly in the weave, and for a moment I become 1,000 sky blue blossoms floating in a field of flax, unthreshed, unbroken, and unspun. And your question made me think, what else would I want to read? Here's a total agrarian poem.
Okay.
Falling. It's early in the book on page 8. Falling. I fell in love with a field of rye. It happened this spring for the first time, and I am not young. Let me tell you how this field was both a single being and a multitude, how it lay open to sky, wind, creature, sound, how it rippled and flowed, bent, bowed, lay down, arose, stood tall, grew taller, held its ground. It hummed and whispered. Sometimes it went completely still. I watched it build itself out of nothing but chemistry. In a few short weeks, each stalk forming leaflet, segment, grainhead, braid, fine hairs. As it grew, wild daisies bloomed inside the long, straight rows, each a separate question to do with love. The sun drove patterns through the furrows, weaving self and shadow into its warp and woof, and every single color would show, threading stems with teal, bronze, blue, black, azure, purple, silver, white. It held the whole world for a while. And even when the rye was cut down and lay flat on the earth to dry where it fell, the all of it radiated a gold and silver light. Still, it glowed. That was actually the working title. Now you've gotten me here to that was the working title of this book, The All of It.
Wow.
So you know they always change the working titles. No, we got to come up with something better than that.
You mentioned, or one poem I mentioned, As It Is, which is on page 21.
Okay. Yeah. As it is. Sometimes I glance up and I see the world as it is, complete, taking the form of a tree, or inky-eyed black-capped chickadee, or a figure in a cherry-red scarf crossing a sliver of street, as if to remind me that everything stands for everything else. Dusk now, winter, the world's a snowy hillside sketched with shagbark hickories, and look, what I first thought to be a string of small boats on a white sea has turned into a line of deer, following each other single file to take shelter beneath boughs of big dark pines for the night. That, too, seems exactly right.
That line in here, in the third stanza, as if to remind me that everything stands for everything else. Can you, I think it's a glorious line as far as, poetry, but can you expand a little on that? I think it's a fabulous line. I mean, you could build
Well,
a series of poems.
yeah, exactly. Well, I think that almost anything is both I don't know how to is both itself, and it's both large and small. It's like every aspect of things, and I mean you get down to some quantum level, and we're all the same stuff, just in different formulations. So in some ways it's like that. Almost anything you look at, anything you see, anything that comes to your attention can stand in for anything else. And the tree may stand in for something completely different to you than it does to me, if it's a particular tree or a particular. But it doesn't matter. It's like a world just opens inside your head. So I think that's really the meaning of that, is that rather than trying to nail things down the way we often try to, it's this, it's that, or figure out why, or have some kind of security in it. It's all in the flow.
It's that's exciting that you say that, because it reminds me, I had a history professor when I went to college. He's a famous historian. He's dead now. His name was John Lukács. And he used to say this crazy thing to us, that there are no historical facts. People used to go, well, date this. There's no historical facts. There is the phenomenology of a fact.
Right.
And for everybody, there's a different fact.
Right.
And I mean, I don't want to go into what they're saying about our current administrator or administrator.
I know.
How facts are, but he used to say it's what lens that you look at. And when so you're talking about this tree, a tree is not just a fact.
Right.
A tree is a life experience for different kinds of people, and how they perceive it, and the phenomenology of nature and the tree. So.
And yet we can agree on certain aspects of the tree.
As bark.
Yeah, and but then there are all these other aspects that just this open up in our own experiences.
Right.
So I think that that's kind of what I meant, or what I was trying to get at in that statement.
But, another poem, I think you read. You talked about the tree in that different sense in terms of life.
Right. Yeah.
And, so, there it goes again. Is that there's and this. I'm just fascinated by that line. There's such truth, in that line of poems. For so much else, and as I said, I think you could build a book of poems or poems just from that, and to reflect on oneself. Well, take that line and apply it to your own reality as you move through each day.
Exactly. I think you should do it.
Yeah. Well, there's a number of things that you've written that have become inspirational.
Oh, good. Good.
We mentioned in your bio about the series, the poetry series that you helped to create or created, which I actually participated in once.
You did?
At Fergus, and I found it, an extraordinary experience. Can you talk about, River Twice?
Absolutely.
And number one, I know that comes from either a Greek philosopher.
It's Heraclitus, who sounds like a disease, but he said, or the way it's quoted, no one steps in the same river twice, because it's not the same river and they're not the same person, simply because we're changing all the time. So you can go back to the river tomorrow and you're still different than you were yesterday.
Right.
So because of that, this actually is really the confluence of performance and theater and poetry, because poetry readings can be dreary. They can be dreary. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Not all of, but I think, I would get frustrated sometimes and thinking, don't you have any sense of staging or any sense of, but I wanted a chance for the audience to kind of participate more in a poetry reading, because when you're an actor on stage, you feel what's happening. You're having a communication all the time with the audience. Even when you're pretending they're not there, you know when they're laughing, you know when they've gasped, and so and the audience knows that you're hearing them, and it's kind of this wonderful interaction that happens between audience and actor in the telling of a story. And so what we do in No River Twice is it's a group of poets, and they're always different each time, but we just move from one poem to the next, and we ask the audience to say, what did you like, Tell us actually, what in this, would you like to hear more about the black-capped chickadee, or what image appealed to you? And then the audience tells us, and someone else says, oh, I've got a poem that will be responsive to that. So we never know where we're going. There are a variety of voices, which I think really is delightful, and then it finds a kind of some kind of an amazing little through line always starts showing up, and things get repeated, or there's a story that becomes told, and we use lines that connected from each poem to create a cento poem that kind of tracks that. And we have a poet with us, Chad Frame, who's just so brilliant at this. He just can put together. So he is collecting the lines. We're sending it to him. He's our cento master. And as a result, at the end of the reading, which isn't very long, it's usually 20, 30 minutes, and then we put together the cento and read it back, and it becomes kind of the poem that the audience created with us. So to me, it's a way of making poetry readings more fun, more inclusive, and as someone said to me, which I thought was really great, I didn't have to try to figure out if I got the whole poem. I didn't have to try to understand. I could just hear the language that I loved, or the idea that caught I just listened to what I liked, or what I responded to.
Right. Yeah. Well, when I participated, I remember the two things that people would. Well, it was just like one word. One was the color pink.
Right.
So I had a poem called Pink Caviar, and it was about
Perfect.
It was about a show in the Louisiana Museum outside of Copenhagen that I went to, and I wrote a poem about it. So there was that, and then then it came to somebody. I asked something about garage. I think it was garage, and I don't know how I got in. And I had a poem called Christ's Garage Sale, and it was about a poem about these places that have created warehouses where all these artifacts from the Catholic Church, where they're closing them or they're breaking them apart, they put them in different sections. So I wrote a poem, about that, and I just said to myself, this is really great, because the audience is really feeding you.
Exactly.
And the other thing is that after the four of us read, there was an opening.
Yeah.
And there was a guy that was in the audience that kind of caught something about the Christ garage sale, and he wanted to do something about garages or garage sale, and he did it like his own. He sat there and wrote it, and got up and he read it. It was a good little poem. I said, this is fascinating. This is really the inclusiveness.
Yeah.
But
it's also what we were just talking about. These things, you can take the word garage, and it'll go in 1,000 different directions.
Right.
The garage sale for Christ,
Yeah.
or all kinds of different things, and it's just an explosion that comes out of a word.
Right. Well, can you kind of close us out, because we're getting close to an ending time, and could you read a poem or two, to kind of close things out? This has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation
let's see, which
experience for
I
our
can,
audience?
oh, well, this is great. I've really enjoyed it. I'm trying to think if I should, how much time do we have?
We have about 3 minutes.
Okay. Um, I will maybe just, I'm tempted to read the last poem, but because they haven't gone through the others, I think I'll just end with actually another. It's what I learned picking blackberries at the farm dump. Another kind of poem. It's on page 72.
Yeah, I got it.
All right, and we'll see where we are there. What I learned picking blackberries at the farm dump. That a world filled with rusted tin cans and cobalt blue glass shards from old cold cream pots spins out buckets of fat beaded globes fed by thunder and sun, fed by hot summer downpours washing down gullies through thickets of thorn. That the thickets bear fruit atop great arching sprays on sharp-studded canes of the past. That canes terrify flesh. That some glossy berries are tight, bitter, juiceless, a mouthful of grit, that I spit these ones out. That it's hard to know which ones are which until tested by tongue. By then it's too late, all the sours inside, but also, when perfect, the sweets inside too. That the thorns on the canes punish any resistance with barbed hooks curved back, drawing blood. To escape, you must reach deeper in. That ticks live there too. That calm is demanded and a rough, long-sleeved shirt, buttoned collar to cuff, canvas pants, heavy boots, and a coffee can hung on a string. That the dark, richest berries need shade to grow sweet. That they purple my hands as I pick, and they purple my mouth as I eat, and they purple the jam cooked with sugar and lemon, pried open in winter and spooned out on toast, with the purple of all of it. Present, past, body, blood, bittersweet, heat, rust, and sky.
Wow. Hayden Saunier, Wheel. Thank you so much, Hayden.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Terrific book of poems. Surely, strongly recommend it. You know where to go and buy it. I don't have to tell you. And all of her books are glorious. They really are. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I look forward to, having you on Philly Loves Poetry. And I want to thank the person behind the camera, Alyssa person who has just returned from Russia to be with us and to make this all happen for you for PhillyCAM. And I want to thank PhillyCAM to continue to sponsor. This is the first show of the 10th year of Philly Loves Poetry series. So I thank you, PhillyCAM, for making this happen for all that time and all the experiences, all the great poets that I've had. But it all comes down to, we don't have this program without the Moonstone Arts Center and without Larry Robbins' undying support for poetry in the city of Philadelphia. I just say this is that, and don't take it lightly, we need your support at Moonstone Arts Center. Larry sponsors over 100 poetry readings every year. He is doing publishing of anthologies that address currently what's happening, and it's as the voices of poetry to speak back at these experiences. Some of them are horrible, some of them are wonderful, but he gives a platform for poets in this city, and he has. So find a way, going to our site, moonstoneartscenter.org, to find a way you can support us. So once again, I thank you, and I thank PhillyCAM for producing this. And I look forward to seeing you next month in February.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.